Hi guys, it's Carrie here, and you are on How to Be an Artist Creator Profile. It's our next episode, and I'm really happy to introduce to you today the lovely Gabriela Warrior Renaud. She is a filmmaker, and I thought it'd be a wonderful opportunity for us to talk about film and the arts and digital media, since that's something that many of you aren't as exposed to. So I'm going to just read a little bit of Gabby's bio before she gets to pop on here and share her voice with you. She is a documentary filmmaker and activist for social and climate justice. She continues her family's legacy of storytelling, encouraging us to reconnect to our history, each other, and the earth. As a queer mixed person of color, Gaby explores topics that are deeply personal in the hopes of humanizing and shedding light on issues that continue to affect many of us and yet still feel overwhelmingly pushed in the dark. Her current documentary project, which is the one I'm really excited to talk to her about today, is called Hyphen, and it was born out of her own desire to feel whole within a fragmented identity. Building a narrative around the mixed experience, Gabriela was able to find the grounding she was seeking and is humbly reclaiming her South Indian heritage. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Communication Studies with a specialization in film production from Concordia University here in Ottawa. She's actually had her work shown at different film festivals in Ottawa and Montreal. She's won different awards for her films, and she's actually a very active member of the Ottawa art community as well, working to make spaces inclusive and diverse and sustainable. So, Gaby, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
When did you first uncover or realize this love or passion for the arts?
Yeah, I was sort of thinking about that today, and I think my journey to becoming an artist felt really natural to me. I think I delved into my career as a professional video producer and looking at kind of what I wanted to do as my own practice just felt really natural. And I think similar to a lot of artists, my desire to really get to know myself and to find a way to pave my own path was really what drew me to the arts. Because for someone like me who's mixed, my parents come from two completely different worlds, and somehow they ended up meeting and creating a family. But it felt like my existence was sort of kind of radical, which is an interesting way of looking at yourself, just because I didn't really have any framework to sort of understand my place in the world. And I didn't really know who I was. I have all these layers to me, which is, really similar to a lot of people, especially if you are juggling cultures or you come from an immigration background. So it really, came from my own desire to get to know myself, and then working more in the arts and my activism work really helped me to see that the art that I wanted to make was so much bigger than myself. So a project like Hyphen that we'll talk a bit about later really sort of helped me to do that. And I think it really works for what I want to do with my practice.
I love how you said that part of why you think you were naturally drawn to the arts is this idea of expressing oneself and finding an understanding voice, because many people in this community will relate to that idea. They want to use art as a way to communicate and share. And while not everyone's really conscious of that, that is something I think ultimately is part of human nature and why we make in the first place. So thank you for sharing that. So film is something I don't often talk about. I have some background in film, but I know my audience doesn't necessarily. And I want to kind of assume that we don't know, we don't know anything. So how would you talk about finding voice in that medium?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm a documentary filmmaker, so a lot of it is utilizing other people's voices. And, the message that I end up creating with a documentary really comes to me completely at the end. So I feel like it's a really different process than fiction filmmaking or creating something that sort of has like a story arc where you know what to expect. It's definitely something that I have learned while I'm doing it. I feel like working on Hyphen, the project has kind of grown with me. So I feel really lucky to be working with a medium that sort of allows that growth alongside of myself. But I think, these days with digital cameras and different apps, like you can make movies on your phone now. It's really awesome. And a lot of Hyphen was done, kind of on a DIY budget and mindset, where I was utilizing what I already had, which was very basic equipment. And I still feel like I'm able to make a really large scale project that I hope can reach a lot of people. So I think it's just understanding the resources that you have and working within that. I mean, you see a lot of films these days being made on smaller budgets or smaller equipment, and just looking at, the communities in Ottawa and what they're creating with the resources that we have here. So, yeah.
Yeah. I love that emphasis too of working with what we have. We can create such limitations for ourselves by saying, well, I can't start something until I have this resource, or until I have this camera, or until this kind of paintbrush. And yet, it'll never get made that way. And how will you actually build that skill or make informed decisions in your voice if you don't get out there and film?
Right. And I think that's the approach that I took with Hyphen. I really didn't know what I was doing at the beginning, but I just kind of threw myself into it. And I've learned so much over the process. And it's actually been really nice to look back. I've been working on Hyphen for 5 years, and just looking back at the journey, the first few things that I did, just even the vocabulary that I was using about the content that I was creating, as well as my own personal style and the way that I filmed things or recorded things. Like I'm learning so much as I go. So I think it's definitely, I would say it's a project about growth as well.
Do you think that's going to reflect in the final product? Like, is that going to be kind of part of a story thread, or how you frame the content?
Yeah, I think so. And it's, Hyphen talks about being a mixed person in Canada, and how, the idea of multiculturalism in Canada has sort of affected not only my identity as a mixed person, but a lot of other people's. And I think I started the project kind of with, I'm going to use the word selfish because it's the only word that I can think of, but it was sort of, I needed to understand my own experience, but then getting to know other people. The film has 22 participants. It really just grew so much. And in the process of understanding other people's experience and getting to hear their voice really reflected a lot of the ways that I was feeling and taught me a lot about myself. So I feel like I've stepped away from the project, and included more of other people's voices, because I find that that's what helped me. And I'm hoping that that's what the film can do for others.
That sounds awesome. So you've told us a little bit about your project, Hyphen. How did it actually get started? Was there a trigger or a moment, or was it kind of this slow growing idea in your mind?
It's always something I've been thinking about. And through when I was doing my undergrad at Concordia, I was taking a lot of classes on, gender and race in the media, and really questioning what I had been consuming my whole life and how that sort of built my own identity, and realizing that I really didn't see myself at all. And I was creating this idea of me based on all these really fragmented pieces. And, right after finishing my undergrad, I got into work and started working as a video producer, and just really feeling like I had this big piece that I wanted to, that I needed to do. I needed to explore that. So, I did the typical quit my job thing and started figuring out how I was going to make this movie. And I was toying around the idea of doing a fiction film, doing a documentary, and I really landed on a documentary just because it seemed like what I wanted to do, because I wanted to explore this topic, but it also seemed something that I could actually do. Like, I didn't need to write a script. I didn't need to find actors. I didn't need to find sets. And, it could be something that I could potentially do by myself. And I have done it by myself. There's only one person in the production. So it's been really great to, wear all the hats as well. It's definitely overwhelming at times, but It's taught me a lot just about filmmaking and, what can I bring to a next production, later on in my career.
Hmm. Do you already have an inkling of a next idea or next project?
Oh my gosh. I have to like consciously stop myself from thinking about all these things. And, I'll watch something on Netflix, a new series or a new film, and think like, oh, wow, that's such an interesting way of looking at a story. I've never really thought of this perspective, or, you know what, I like this perspective, but I think, what about this side of things? Or I never watch films and TV with like a non-critical eye anymore. I just can't turn that part of my brain off anymore. So I'm always thinking, but definitely moving towards climate justice work is really important for me. So I'm thinking that my next project will probably be around that, and probably on the lens of environmental racism, and looking at the people who are first affected by climate change. Are the people, farmers in Honduras picking coffee, like those are the people who are being affected first. And I think that lens will probably be what I'll be looking at next.
Oh, that sounds great. Where I don't know what I want to ask you next. I guess, can you walk us a bit through the process of making a film, kind of a big picture, looking down on building Hyphen, and kind of how you piece it together?
Yeah. It was, I think, well, maybe I'll explain how I kind of worked
Sure.
it. I think because this film was so personal to me, I really wanted to go through that phase before. So I actually started the process making a short film about me and my experience in my family. So that was kind of the first step for me, just because I had all these things that I wanted to say and wanted to explore. And I really love this piece because it's kind of like a love note to myself and my childhood and the home that I grew up in, and my family. And I felt like I could put that at rest. And, I said my piece, and then I could kind of go forward and really open up to other people. Like I'm a pretty shy person. I'd never really talked about this in public. I'd never really talked to my parents about it. So it was a way for me to start that conversation. And I think for, a project like a documentary that talks about the effects of colonialism and racism in Canada, it's not easy stuff to talk about. So I felt like that short film was a really good way for me to start talking about it. And then I got comfortable talking about it. And then I was able to meet other people. And honestly, when I started Hyphen, I had no idea what it would turn into. I did not know that I would interview 22 people, that I would drive by myself across the country to interview everyone, that I would be producing this film by myself and, doing all these things. So yeah, definitely being open. And also because it's such a fluid project, I really needed to just let all of those expectations go.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, for a first project, understanding your limits as an artist as well, and thinking, you're always going to doubt yourself, but I think really appreciating the work that you put in and your own energy in this, it's worth a lot of time. And there's moments where, it feels really overwhelming, but I think if you can be proud of the work that you're doing, that's really important as well. And yeah, just really, it's become my whole life. It's something that I think about every day, and it's really taught me a lot about myself. So yeah, it's brought so much into my life.
Yeah, what more can you ask for? That's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's I think that's what art can do for people, and not
Mhm.
only for the maker, but then when we get to share it with others, there's this greater impact and reach that's so powerful and so special.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
What's your timeline with Hyphen right now? Where are you at with its completion?
So I was lucky enough to get a grant from the city of Ottawa last summer.
Congratulations.
Thank you, to help with the editing. So 2 years ago, I did a cross country road trip where I interviewed all the participants in the film. So I drove from coast to coast by myself, interviewing everyone. And when I got back, that trip was very intense. I'm sure you can imagine. The conversations I was having were not easy ones, and by the time I was done, I was definitely, I felt very heavy. So I took some time off, and definitely took it easy. That year also, I went to India for the first time with my mom. And we went back to where my grandfather grew up and where my mom grew up. And that was really special. And I was able to bring the camera with me. So that's going to make it into the film as well. So that was a really big year for production. And it was, things that I'm so excited to, put together. But the editing phase has been the hardest. And I think that's definitely the case for a documentary, just because you're not really starting with anything. I didn't start with, scripts or kind of a
Right.
story arc. Like, I'm really building it now. So now that I have all the content, it's really about going through all of your footage, listening to all of your interviews. Like, I feel like I know these 22 people
I'm sure.
so well. And I have all these interviews in my mind and this is how I edit. And I don't know if it's, if it would work for everyone, but I want to feel like I can listen to a clip and think in my head, oh, I remember when that person said that thing. It really reflects what this person is saying. I'm going to put this clip next to this one. So it's really understanding the content that you have and really trying to, it's hard to do, but to like take a step back from it all. I feel like I needed to create this like map in my apartment with like the strings attaching different pieces together. So a lot of what I've been doing this year is just listening and learning about the content and trying to find some kind of story arc. And I've split the film up in like 6 different themes of what I sort of noticed that came out of the interviews. And I'm slowly putting them together. It's really hard not to get overwhelmed because there's just so much good stuff, but trying to, edit theme by theme. I've decided not really to give myself any deadlines. I don't want to rush this process. But I also, don't want to continue to drag this on for another, 5 years. So I'm hoping that I can give myself a little bit of a push and try and complete this in a year. But, we'll see. And I work, and I work full time. So this is a side project, which I'm sure is a reality for many artists, juggling time and your energy when you come home from work. It's definitely hard. And, staying home on the weekends instead of going out for brunch or whatever is decisions that I have to make sometimes. But we'll see. We'll see how long it takes me.
A lot of people in here will connect to the fact that you have a full-time job, because many people are working or have other kinds of obligations, like they're a caregiver for a family member, things like this. And so they can feel a lot of guilt or worry or like lack of permission to find the time when they have it too. Have you had to navigate any feelings like that with your work?
Absolutely. And I'm the kind of person who, if I don't do something for a day, I feel guilty. I look at the time, I'm like, oh, that was 5 hours that I could have spent, not watching
I totally
Netflix.
Yes.
But, I've really had to just be kind to myself, because the stuff that I'm working on, it's hard. It's a lot of emotional labor, and I can't be on all the time. And the work that I do in my day job is also not easy. Like, I work for a nonprofit, and we work in, social justice. So it's not easy conversations that I have every day, and we're tackling really big issues. So when I come home, sometimes I feel really drained. And, well, not today, but summer, it's hard to stay inside and edit in my tiny dark room by myself. And that's the thing about filmmaking, is I'm not very portable. So I have to, edit at a desktop computer. But I found that if I schedule in my time for myself, I'm a little bit more, I try to be a bit more organized. And, if you look at the time that you spend at home working on your project as billable hours, the same way you do at your work, at your day job, then you can kind of understand the value that you're bringing to your work. Maybe you're not paying yourself right now, but if you kind of keep like a timestamp of how much time you're spending, which also can help in grant writing. How much money do you need to ask for? Well, how much time have you spent this month? And how much money does that, what does that come up to?
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great advice. I love that idea. Just in terms too of finding self-worth for this time, or feeling justified in giving
Mm-hmm.
yourself that time. I think that would be a great way for people to see kind of what their time is worth, and their art time is valuable.
Absolutely.
How how do you know when a film is finished?
Oh, I don't know. There's like that moment that and it's so hard to explain because for everything you can edit until there's nothing left. I mean,
Right.
you'll cut till there's nothing left. My film teacher told me, and I will never forget this, that your film is not finished until you've cut your favorite shot. And
Oh.
yeah, it's harsh, but it's that shot that you're like trying to move everything to make that shot work. Well, maybe you just need to cut it out and just look at it without it. If you hate it, put it back. It's fine. We can do that these days with undo. It's okay. But your stuff, like your content is so precious to you. You've put in so much of your time, and most of it doesn't make it to the final cut.
Right.
I have months of footage that I could ask people to sit through, but that's not my purpose here. My purpose is to make a feature-length documentary that once people see it, feel that impact, and it's not repetitive. I don't want it to feel long. And I want people to leave with some questions. So I don't want to give everything, but also I have all this content that I can recycle in the future. And then that I'm doing right now, like I've done a few other projects with this content because I know that not everything will make it to the film, but I feel like I don't want to let anything go. So yeah, I do find it hard not to over edit, but I think in filmmaking and for me, once you get the music and the soundtrack in, and I really like to edit to music just to kind of get the cuts on the beat and stuff like that. And, that really like creates another layer of emotion. And once all those pieces are together and, you've done your credits and everything, I really like to ask someone to watch it with me who hasn't really been involved in the project, and sort of watch them watch the film and kind of get their reaction. And, everybody's style is different. So yeah, I think just being patient with yourself, and also just think of yourself as the end user and what you want that person to get out of. Because, I've been working on this film for so many years. I know it by heart. I will know it by heart when it's done. But to try and think of yourself as someone who's never seen it before, yeah, like how does that look? Can you take one more thing out? Is this repeated there? What would it be like if this wasn't there? Would you still get the message across? I think is when you know.
You mentioned it looks like there's kind of 6 overarching themes that are directing or guiding the film. Do you want to talk about one of them?
Oh, yeah. Let me think of them all. Yeah, I mean, one of the bigger themes is kind of a bigger picture theme, looking at Canada as a whole. When we think of Canada, we think of a multicultural place that has a lot of diversity, but I think a lot of Canadians don't really understand or can't really put their finger on what it means to be Canadian. And I think that really is reflected in what it's like to be a mixed race person, is that you don't really know who you are, and you don't really have, a really clear sense of what your identity is. And also looking at, what is multiculturalism and who does it work for? Does it work? So asking those big questions, and really looking at, there is racism here, and it's not a perfect country. And a lot of people, will compare us to the States and saying that, at least we're not like them and we're not overly racist and everybody's nice here. And that's really not the case. And I think I'm always surprised when people are surprised that there's racism in Canada. Like, I'm not surprised because I deal with it on a day-to-day basis. But a lot of people who are especially if they're with me and they witness something racist that happens to me, and they're like, I can't believe that just happened. we live in Canada. I'm like, yeah, exactly. So I think just kind of breaking that down and talking about it, because it's definitely a reality for a lot of people here that I think people don't really know. Um, yeah, so kind of relating those two things.
And something that's not talked about, or if we pretend, like if we think it doesn't exist, well, then how do you possibly begin to address it as a problem? So I think, obviously having conversations and creating your film will hopefully help more people see what you see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. What, for artists here in this community who might now be like, maybe I would like trying to work with film. What kind of advice would you have for them to getting started?
I mean, there's so many ways to just kind of try it out and play with things. Your phone is a great tool if you want to just, film a few things and try to put something together. It doesn't have to have like a clear story arc, doesn't have to be perfect. But just, trying some stuff out. If you have any ideas that have been bumping around in your head for years, just write them down. And there's a lot of really great organizations in Ottawa that can help you. I'm a member of Saw Video. They're a great artist-run organization, and they have a program called Jumpstart. It's a mentorship program where you apply. It's a grant, but the what you get is you're teamed with a mentor in Ottawa who kind of like the mentor is selected for you. So they either work in kind of a similar topic as you, or the person thinks that, you two will have a similar attitude towards things. So I think seeking mentorship is great. I wish that I had done that a bit earlier, even if it's not technical mentorship, just talking about content, because filmmaking is not only a technical practice, it's also all about storytelling. And depending on, like I had to explore a lot of different topics that I didn't know about, like colonialism and multiculturalism and race studies, and how to be critical of different things. So that's something that I had to learn, but I also had to learn how to film and edit and record sound properly. There's so many different elements to filmmaking. So definitely reaching out to people. If there's anybody who, has done similar work or who knows about a topic that you want to explore, to reach out to them. And if you have any kind of equipment, to just try it out and see, you can do it all. Like if you wanted to do some acting, maybe see if there's, an acting class in your community center or something, or if you have a group of friends and you want to do, a funny YouTube video of something. Like there's just so much space. I think, things like social media, especially Instagram, is such a great way of learning. I know I learn a lot about not only the content that I want to talk about, but also the way that I want to do things. The internet is just full of really awesome communities of people like this who, are sharing skills and knowledge, and just tapping into that as well, I think is a good place to start.
Yeah, I agree. I read some research by a man named Anders Ericsson, and he has a book called Peak that came out, and he did 30 years of research uncovering what people who are deemed experts in their fields have done to reach expert level status. And one of the key ingredients is feedback from mentors and peers.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter, we don't have to strive to be the expert or the utmost person in our field, but isn't it nice to know that that's something we could do to help our art and the work that we're doing?
Yeah. And I think mentorship is a great, I'm mentoring someone who's in the Jumpstart program at the moment. And it's taught me a lot about filmmaking, and a lot about how do you transfer skills. This is something that I want to continue doing, and I want to work with other people. How do I share what I have, and how do you learn from other people? I think it's such a great way of connecting with each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
We've got two more questions here, and then we'll wrap it up here. So what's advice or support you had wished you had had for yourself, or you wish you knew when you first started Hyphen that you know now?
I think what was missing from my education was the practical side of, how do you make money as an artist? I still don't know the answer to that. And I'm still learning, but, how do you write grants? How do you produce? How do you find equipment? All this technical stuff that I find is such important information if you're going to do this. But it seems so hard to find. I took some workshops at SAW about grant writing, and I mean, that really is what led to me getting a grant. So really looking at what's available in your community. If there's any artist run centers, befriend them because they have so many resources. I think as artists, we really need to work together because each of us approaches the same thing in a different way, which I find so silly because these are things that we should all know how to do. How do we make money from being an artist? If you want to do this full time, how do you not sacrifice so much to do it? How can you afford healthcare? How can you get benefits as a freelancer? All these things that I'm still learning. And I really wish that was part of art education because it's just not sustainable.
Right. And our final question here is, what does it mean to you to be an artist?
Oh, wow. I think the projects that I want to work on are so much bigger than me that, I guess what I hope to do with my art is not only teach others, but teach myself. I think I've learned so much about myself through making my art. And I feel like every time I talk to people, somebody takes something away and they learn something new, whether it's a new word or, the next day they'll interact with someone who doesn't look like them a little bit differently. And I think that's my goal with my art. I think it's a really amazing way for all of us to reconnect to each other. I think in a time where we feel really, the individual is priority, I think sharing art is a really great way for us to get a sense of the fact that we're actually just a collective of people who just need to listen to each other a little bit more. It really helps me to do that with myself. I know that when I work on Hyphen, I feel this connection to myself, my history, my family, and these people who I didn't know a few years ago, who now I know them really in like this really intimate, special way. I think that's such a beautiful gift that documentary filmmaking has given me, is to have people trust me with their stories. And I feel really grateful that people do trust me because I think is a really important way for us to kind of connect with each other.
Yeah. Amen. I think that's a great place to end it. Gaby, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate your time and your personal experience and story that you could share with us.
It was a really great conversation. Thank you for having me, Carrie.
Well, guys, that's today's How to Be an Artist Creator profile. I'd love for you to continue this conversation whenever you watch this. Comment below and tell us what's one big aha that you've had for your own art or your journey as a creative, so we can keep having this conversation. I'll make sure you guys have links to Gaby's website, and I'll keep you posted so when her documentary is live and ready to go, we can also celebrate it with her. So guys, we'll see you next time on How to Be an Artist Creator profile.